To Crystal Cave, which is like 40 minutes from here. And there he discovered his love for caves, so he went and bought this one. And during that year, he started renovating it, putting railings and lights and things like that in, so that the following year, in 1930, he could open it to the public for tours. So we've been doing tours here for around 95 years. Now over here are just a few rules before we go down. No smoking your food in the cave, of course you have to keep it clean, don't touch the formations. The oils on our skin do stop the rocks gross if we touch them, and we don't want that. Same with the guided walkways, that one's pretty easy, it's like a straight path. Don't remove or face anything, which means don't remove or break anything. And as long as you're not touching anything, you shouldn't do that. And lastly, no audio and video recording. Pictures with or without flash are perfectly fine, and obviously so are small videos, just no super long videos. Any questions? Right, so as we head down, just watch your step. This is the steepest part of this tour. There are railings to the side if you need them. You can fetch those.
Okay. Oh, should we go
Yeah,
first?
go here.
Oh, okay.
Here first.
Oh, thanks.
Well.
好了，我喺度啊。
So right here is the first formation of our cave, which is called botchroids, or rock popcorn. So our cave is what is called a solution cave, meaning that at one point it was fully filled with and made up of water. And as that water slowly dissolved all these rocks you see around you, it gained minerals from those rocks and became so mineral saturated that it couldn't take any more in. So those minerals that were still being dissolved, instead of going into the water, had to stick to the sides of the rocks to form what you're seeing today, which are again called botchroids, or rock popcorn. These can also be called nature's bathtub rain, because if you filled your bathtub about halfway and let it sit for a good 250,000 years, it would then be just like this. So again, to help that little experiments over. And then as we head on here, there is going to be a low-hanging 5'1" rock, so watch your head on that. And there's 8 steps afterwards, so watch your steps.
Tall guy go first. Don't worry, I got it. I got it. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Feel a little cool water, girls?
So right here is our first room of the cave, which we call our crystal chapel. As I'm sure you noticed when you first walked in, we do have a giant wall of what is called flowstone. So flowstone is created when that mineral saturated water drips from our ceiling, along our walls, and leaves a bunch of different layers of different minerals. Now, the most likely mineral our flowstone is made of is what's called calcite. A good example of that is right here. It's pure white color, it's pure calcite, but it can get stained over time by a various amount of things. Like over here, this brownish color is iron oxide or rust. And that's because if you look around, you can see candle holders on our flowstone. So these were put down here before anybody bought our cave, so before these lights were installed. So They've been down here for like 100 years now or so, and they're made of metal, so they've rusted over time, and they've rusted our flowstone too. Next to the rust, you might see like a grayish color, and that's magnesium oxide, and that's because of the high magnesium concentration in our limestone, which is the rock we're surrounded by. So there's also so much magnesium that it ends up staying in our flowstone. And right over here, this greenish color is not a mineral, but instead a plant. It's not natural to our cave, but it was kind of brought down here by humans. Does anybody know what plant this might be? Yeah, algae. Yeah, so like I said, this algae isn't natural to our caves, but it's down here because there are these things called algae spores outside. And when we're outside, we pick up those spores on us in our clothing. And when we get down here, they rise off of us up to our light and get pushed out onto our flowstone permanently. And you might also notice a few divots taken out of our flowstone, like right over here. And that's because, again, before anybody bought a cave, people used to come down here and take pieces out of our flowstone to put a wood floor in. So this wood floor was about to your guys' waist height right now, and it was used for none other than square dancing. So this was the early 1900s, again, before anybody bought a cave, so not many people had AC. So on a warm summer day, instead of jumping in a cool lake or river, people would come down here in the 52-degree weather in our cave and square dance. Now in front of our wall here, you might see an altar, and that's because we used to do marriages down here. So we do have a little designation to our first marriage on June 23rd, 1949. It was the owner's son who first got married down here, so that's why we call it our Crystal Chapel. Now we do, so in front of the altar is where two people would stand to be wed. Back here is where guests would sit to watch the ceremony. And all the way up here, the person who squeezed down there to see what was on the other side was about 6'4". You can probably imagine when they came out, they were complaining to everybody about their lower back pain. And in Latin, lower back pain is lumbago. So right now you're just looking at lower back pain alley, everybody. The last thing I'm going to show you in this room is what we call a cage mascot. This obviously isn't a real animal, but we think it kind of resembles one. Does anybody know what animal this looks like? Yeah, turtle. Yeah, this is also our giant sea turtle. So if you can't see him, it's okay. Sometimes you gotta look hard. Here's its eyes, its nose, its giant flipper, and of course its giant shell. So Oscar's shell is made of the same stuff that's on this wall right next to you, which is kind of flowstone. And because flowstone, like many other things in the cave, can take 100 to 1,000 years to grow 1 inch, Oscar here obviously took a very long time to grow. So everybody just say hi, Oscar. Hi, Oscar. Let's try a bit harder. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hi, Oscar. Thank you guys. I assume we have in our cave. It goes up about 50 feet, and above that is another 50 feet of rock and soil. So again, right now we're all about 100 feet underground. Now, if you look to the right a bit, you can see what we call a natural bridge. So this is a giant chunk of limestone that weighs about 2 tons or 4,000 pounds. And you might be wondering how we're so sure it won't fall right on you guys. But don't worry, the National Caves Association comes by every 6 months or so to get a few volunteers to climb up our rocks and jump up and down. No way. Now remember, these are volunteers, so feel free to do that anytime you like. There are also perks to the rocks above, so they don't fall if the rock falls. But if it does, we should probably close. But thankfully that's never happened, and hopefully it never does. But if it does, that's why you guys are standing under it and not me. To the left of it, you can see a rock that kind of resembles a dinosaur fossil or a T-Rex skull. Now, unfortunately, we haven't found any fossils in our cave, and we think the entrance was open too late for there to be any. But we have found one subfossil, which was a snail shell dating just under 10,000 years old. That's why it's called a subfossil. I don't have it with me here, but once we get back to the surface, if you'd like to see it, it's on plaque number 34 by the men's bathroom. So a bit of an awkward spot, but it's there. And also, if you look all around this room, you can see stalagmites, so like right over here. A lot of people say these look like wax candles, but they're actually stalagmites. And they give us a bit of an insight on how a stalagmite doesn't need a stalactite, and a stalactite doesn't need a stalagmite. So pretty interesting. Now, as we move on here, just watch your step. There's a little puddle right by us.
Okay.
take pictures in front of our flowstone, feel free to. I can take pictures of you guys too if you'd like. Just this is the last you're going to be seeing of our wall of flowstone. So feel free to take pictures. Anybody else want pictures?
Oh, you guys go ahead.
표책 보고라 역 녹지가 일단 보고 까마까마라.
We're trying to make a ramp up, like trying to see, but it's like just really rocky. And the giant wood plank on the way out, trying to do it before.
So how to put the bricks in?
So the bricks were installed in the late 1940s, I think. It was just a company we hired. But yeah, the cement was put in during those 2 years we started renovating it. 3, 2, 1, cheese.
Can we do a kissy face one? It's our anniversary. It's our anniversary. Yes, it's our anniversary. Aww. Thank you so much.
So the cement was all put down in like 1930, 1932, and the brick was all laid down in the late 1940s. So, but yeah, it's obviously a lot to put in here.
Does it have to get cleaned to figure out a place?
No, so we don't clean anything. So that's why you can see like flowstone on our brick. So the same stuff that's on this wall, and it's obviously all muddy because the mud we track down here. But yeah, we don't clean any of it. So is everybody good on pictures now?
Yeah.
Now before we move on, I do want to talk to you guys real quick about a room I unfortunately can't take you to today, and nobody's been able to go back there for the past 40 years or so. And that's because not only is the entrance to the room completely flooded by the Lost Rivers water, we're going to be walking over it a bit, but the room itself is about halfway flooded by the same water. So the first time we found this room was in 1963, when we sent a few employees under that bridge to clean out all those pennies you'll see on the riverbed. Now, it was during a time of major droughts. There was no water in our river, so they could safely get to the bottom without getting wet. And they were cleaning out those pennies until they noticed an entrance to a new room we hadn't been to before. So they went through that entrance, went about 5 feet back behind it, which is 6 feet behind this wall of flowstone, and 8 feet under, and they found our new room, which was 5 feet wide, 12 feet tall, and 65 feet long, so more of a hallway than a room. But they came back up to the surface and told everybody that the formations inside of it were so beautiful and untouched by man that they were fit for royalty. And that's why we dubbed it our Queen's Room. Now, unfortunately, that first time we found it in 1963, we didn't get any pictures. But luckily for us, about 20 years later, in 1981, there was another major drought in the area. So that's when we sent a giant camera crew down to take a bunch of pictures, and that's what they did. So once we get back to the surface, if you'd like to see the beautiful 1980s quality photos of our Queen's Room, I'm sure any employee can show you the way to them. Any questions? Right, so as we head on, just watch your step. We are going to be walking over our lost river, so don't throw anything like pennies in, because it does pollute our water, which we found out the hard way. And don't throw each other in, because that's it. Congratulations, guys, we found it. Now, there are a few things to note about our river. First of all, of course, is all that turquoise color at the bottom. So those are all pennies. And those are there because before anybody bought our cave, people used to come down here and use our river as a natural wishing well. So these pennies have been down here for like 100 years now, give or take. So they've oxidized over time into that turquoise color. And they've also cemented themselves to the floor of our river. So we couldn't get them up even if we wanted to. You might also notice our river only seems like 2 or 3 feet deep right here, but it's all mineral water in our river. And mineral water kind of magnifies everything at the bottom. So our river may only seem 2 or 3 feet deep, but in reality, it's closer to 4 to 6 feet deep right here. Now, you might also notice everything in our cave is a stagnant 52 degrees Fahrenheit, including the temperature of the air and the water. And that's because the limestone, which is the rock around us, kind of acts like a natural insulation. So everything stays 52 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. I also want to point out how clear our river is. So clear you can see right to the bottom. And I'll talk about that a bit more in our next room. So as we head on, just watch your head and watch your step.
So basically, the actual copper pennies that bring senses back into the copper. Because pennies back in the day had no copper content. That's why they were turquoise color. Because they were oxidized. But more pennies, the pennies now, they have more zinc in them than they do copper. Like the first ones,
Yeah, but yeah, it is, yeah. So like I said, 52 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mới đi tìm ra bộ cái đi kia sửa cho bé chứ. Cổ mấy ông bố chính cả. À.
There'll be a drip hole at the end. You can dip your fingers in. It's a bit easier to access. Alright, so this is our new room of the cave. As you can probably tell by the name, this is the newest room in our cave, open to the public. And that's because at first we didn't have that bridge across the Lost River that we all just walked across. So that bridge was created 2 years after all the other rooms were open to the public. So this one was opened 2 years after all the others in 1932. Not only is this the newest room in our cave, it's also the deepest. Right now we are all 116 feet underground, with the cave's parking lot just above us. Now you might notice that our cave kind of ends here. You can see it squeeze down there, so you look at that. And that's because if you look around, you can see we're surrounded by what is called shale. And shale is a lot harder to dissolve and erode than limestone, which is what the cave is made of. So the water that was in this cave before it went away, it kind of stopped dissolving our cave right here because of how hard that shale was to dissolve. You might also either see or hear our Lost River running right by us. And this is the last we see of our river in our cave. So it's called the Lost River, of course, because we don't know where it comes from or where it goes, and we wanted to find out. So we conducted a series of 3 experiments. For our first experiment, we got a bunch of ping pong balls, brought it all down. We told people in the area that if they saw 2 ping pong balls going down the river near my home, to give us a call. Now, nobody called, so for our next experiment, we poured a boatload of dye down. It was completely safe for our river, but again, we told people in the area that if they were swimming in our river, came home and realized they were showering off dye, to give us a call. Now, in hindsight, maybe red wasn't the best color choice, so really wrong. So for our third and final experiment, we sent someone down this narrow passageway right back here. So if you look hard enough, you can see some of the Lost River down there. So we figured if we sent someone down there during another major drought, they might be able to find out where it ends up going. And that's exactly what we did. During that same major drought in 1981, when we got those pictures of the freeze room, we sent someone down. They went about 30 yards that way until they realized it was going to make it too narrow to keep going or turn around. So we just left him down there. He might still be down there. I have no clue. No, I'm joking. He came out here safe and sound, perfectly fine, and told us one very important piece of information, which is that the river goes that way. So that's the only piece of information we were 100% sure about already. So that did not help us at all. But we do have a few reasons to believe our river here is a completely underground water source, which means that water from the surface filtered through some type of rock, probably limestone, and then found an opening or cavity and started breaking through and gaining water until it became this river that passes like a cave. So the reason we think it's that is because, like I said, none of our experiments helped, nobody called, and also, like I was pointing out earlier, if you look at our river, you can see it's very clear. So clear, you can see right to the bottom without a problem, and it stays like this all year round. It never gets cloudy or muddy, never towards the thunderstorms. And of course, there's no life in our river like fish and like pollution. So we figured if it reached the surface at any point, it would have some of those qualities, but it doesn't. That's again why we think it's a completely underground water source. Any questions?
Probably comes maybe from one aquifer to another.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking. Yeah. So back there, you can actually hear the river like colliding into a different water source. So we don't know if it's the river crashing into itself from the cave maybe, or just a different aquifer. But yeah, we really don't know. Now, before we move on, I do want to point out what's right up here, which is our largest stalactite in the cave. We call this our giant ear of corn, and because it's about 4 feet tall, it may have taken 50,000 years to grow. Now, if you look at the bottom, you can still see some water dripping, so that means it is still growing. So if we come back in like 100 to 1,000 years, it may have grown an inch. So if you see all then, I'll probably still be working here. We're going to make our way back up to the front so we can come on out. These are actually just called stalactites. They're like the moving shark teeth. Now these start out the same way that cave bait does, which is the same stuff I was showing you in the breakdown room. But eventually it had nowhere else for the roof to drip to, so instead just started dripping straight down into the walls of the back. Now this one to the right does have a stalagmite under it, and these two have formed into a column. And we know that for sure because the National Caves Association, who were the same guys that John had big rock out there, came by about 40 years ago and told us these two had officially formed into a column. It's pretty interesting that some people working here got to see these become a column while they were working. Right over here is the last formation I want to talk about, which is called amphibite. Now we don't know much about amphibite. All we do know is that it's so fragile that if the back came down here and got between its launch and five, it would break into a million different pieces. That's the same reason we can't really get it studied, because if we did have a professional come down here and we tried to test it and they touched it, again it would break into a bunch of different pieces. That's why we don't know much about it. All we do know is that it's very fragile and for that reason very rare. And we have two in our cave. The first that you're looking at right now, and the other one is in our Queens room. And then I'm going to take you today, it's happening on it. But once we get back to the surface, you're going to see the pictures of it. I'm sure any employee will show you the way. Any questions? So as we are, just watch your step and watch your head here. If we don't, that's fine. We'll figure it out. You can be like our next mascot or something. And the last part of our tour here, the cashier. As you pay, please just stay in your group so you know if you're paying for it, and don't leave until your group is paid for. If you paid in advance, you should have a receipt at the front desk. You'll hand that in here. If you did,
mời đó hả? Hả? Thank you. bây giờ俾個 receipt 你咯。OK， 去個廁所就走啦。What's the restroom?
The restroom gets to go out and then walk up.
OK， 行啦。係咯，點樣出啊？啊？哦，佢上嗰度先啊！哇，呢個好靚喎，點解唔錄啊？呢個？叫你行返樓上啊嘛，呢度出去行樓上啊嘛，呢度有窗賣㗎，我哋得喺晒上邊啊，出去啦，行上樓上啊！啊，叻仔啦！哇，佢得嚟傻夠晒大隻。廁所啦，我改俾去啦。啊？咩啊？
It's closed, someone's cleaning.
哦，等一陣啊嘛。咩呀？唔急啫係嘛？唔急啊，去食嘢一陣啦。好啦，走啦。哦，咁都話嚟過啊嘛，家阿哥啊。
给你看腿，看腿。
快隻啊，幫我哋影張相啊呢度。哎，來了，哈哈，這大大家啊。啊，行埋過啦，有乜所謂啊？一場嚟到。啊，幫我喺度揸住。
你隻手遮咗啊，輝仔。
冇，我遮唔到。你 call 得。